we're on. That'll be fun for whoever gets the podcast. So, similarities and differences. You know that old 4th grade question? Go. Start. Think. Talk.
The first person that came by was actually an Upper Paleolithic person, and he said, we have stuff like this. Yeah. And then because he was telling me about the Venus figurines and how they have like the woven, things that they wear, like the wigs. He was like, you need to take this back further. And I had actually a few Upper Paleolithic people come by and say that this was really important, what I was doing. And
I've been telling you it's important. That's awesome. I want to hear more about it. That'll be great. Thanks. Interesting, huh? Don't you think? You know, when you study Greek art and you study the Parthenon, you think, okay, this is it. Nothing could be better than this. This is perfect. Don't you? That's what I always thought. And I mean, really, it's okay. Actually, the Temple of Zeus at Olympia is perfect. We all know that. But, just the statement, the complete marriage, sculpture on all the sides, and the sculpture is so elegant and inspiring and beautiful. And blah, blah, blah. But by the time of the Attalids in Pergamon, Parthenon was old. Looked good. It was, upkeep was nice and all that. It's not like it was falling down. But let's see. When are the victories of Attalus the First over the Gauls? So what century is that? 3rd, later part of the 3rd century BCE. What's the date of the Parthenon? Whew. If you know one thing when you get out of this class. 431. What century is the Parthenon? Oh my God. I'm just going to keel over here. I'm just going to lay down and cry. Oh my God. What century is Parthenon? Yes. Yeah. Know it. Never forget it. Teach your grandchildren. The Parthenon is the 5th century BCE. All right. So 5th to 4th, 4th to 3rd. 200 years. Let's see. What's the year right now? 2010? What's 200 years ago? Before the War of 1812. Okay, that's how old the Parthenon was to Attalus the First. That is old. So, it needs a little updating. How is the Great Altar at Pergamon an improvement on the Parthenon? What do you think?
Well, they ended all those polygons, not just 12 gods. By showing more like
more gods. More gods. What else? Yeah, like what is the deal with sculpture up in these little boxes? Come on, get it down there. What else? Yeah, it's life size and you are there. They are crawling up the steps, you are walking up the steps. Whoa, snaky-tailed giants.
There are direct quotes on the altar as well.
Yeah, so it's not as if the sculptors and designers here are ignoring the Parthenon. They're using the Parthenon. They're bettering the Parthenon. This is a new and improved Parthenon.
It's much more welcoming to people. It's more accessible to human beings.
Because?
Wide steps,
in fact, what is this?
human love.
What is this?
Like a theater.
Yeah, it's, well, what is the function of this thing? What is it? Its name is the... Yeah, right. Okay, thank you. So, what is it? I know everybody's like, this is hard. What's she getting at? So, what is it? An altar. Yeah, that's right. So, you have to walk up to it. In fact, this is just the frame. This is just the casing. This is not even the altar. Here, the altar is inside. So, yeah, it's designed to have you come. The Parthenon is a temple. It's not, the altar's on the outside. So, see here, I mean, Attalus could have built whatever he wanted. He could have built a temple in the sanctuary here, below the sanctuary of Athena. He doesn't. He builds a great big altar. It's this gigantic open space with a great big altar. No temple. Why? Because, what is the deal with a temple? A temple is boring. It's just this box, and then just only a few people can get inside at once, unless Parthenon, of course, very big. And then that cult statue takes up a whole lot of space. So then there's less space for all of you to be interacting, to be gathering and admiring and walking up the steps.
Do you have any other examples of a giant altar like this? The altar at Olympia, but it's kind of a giant on that.
Yeah. Big altars are typical of sanctuaries in Asia Minor, in the Greek East. The tradition of big altars is old, and in fact, were we to be talking about that sort of thing in here, which we're not sort of really, but it's a very good point, Attalus I is actually, in choosing to make a gigantic altar, is channeling that tradition. So the temple of Artemis at Ephesus, one of the seven wonders of the ancient world, enormous, ginormous temple, enormous, ginormous altar, very, very large, as wide across the front as the facade of the temple, which is, 10 columns or something like that across the front, huge. Temple of Apollo at Didyma, Temple of Artemis, Leukophrenia, Magnesia, there are a lot of them in the Greek East. So Attalus knows this, probably been around. There were also very large temples, huge temples, and you can read the chapter on Hellenistic architecture and architectural theatricality in Mr. Pollitt's book to get more of that. But yeah, very good point. So the choice is an altar, which is more engaging. You have to interact with it. I mean, you cannot make a sacrifice unless you get up to it. You have to get up to it. That's the whole deal with an altar as opposed to a temple. So this is a monument for a new time. How is it Greek? Now you just might want to take a look at that little chart or list that you've been keeping, the one that we revisited when we had our discussion day. Being as how the name of the class is Greek Art and Archaeology, just good every so often to check back in, make sure we're on track. Because, we're in Turkey. This site is in Turkey. I mean, the modern country of Turkey. Just to remind you. Why not? Ionic is 100 times more popular in the Greek East. There's hardly any Doric in the Greek East. Oh, it's a little early for... The only people who do Corinthian like temple-wide, are the Romans, and they're not here yet. They're coming. Soon, they're on their way. Right, here they come. That dust cloud coming out of the west. You just committing everything to memory? No notes?
I'm trying. All I can think of is horses, though.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Gods are like humanized.
Oh, good. You even have it. It's good. So what do you say? Is the great altar of Pergamon Greek art? Yeah? Why?
Because it shows their love story.
Love of story. What else?
Also, like, just like the relationship with the gods, you're saying you're really kind of moving away from that, by putting them down. A personal relationship with the gods, actually physically, right? In that they are right there. Do you have your hand up?
Yeah. So it shows they put the money a bigger altar than they had before.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's like everything about it is on steroids. The great altar. The figures, the size, everything right down. Yeah, huge. Absolutely.
They still like to write on stuff.
Oh, they still like to write on stuff. Yeah, that's right. Because everything's labeled just to get specific about it. Right, the gods are all gods. And the giants. The giants have names too. And that must have taken some research. Because that is not the names of the giants. Well, actually, a lot of them must have really been made up for this. The giants were just the enemies. They didn't all have specific names. They were the giants. Oh, yeah. What else? There were more hands. Got it? She got it. Somebody got it. Something else? Interested in? Absolutely. Look how this story is told. It's not symbolic. It's not metaphorical. Well, I mean, it's metaphorical in the sense that there's gods and giants as opposed to Pergamines and Gauls. But it's human. Right. Yeah. So. Okay. You like it better? This good? Like it? Just one blow for the Hellenistic period. Let's see if we can keep it up. Because, the Hellenistic period is the best period. I think. So, Attalus I, according to the Roman tourist, Pausanias, he who confused us about the order of the figures on the east pediment of the Temple of Zeus, that same Pausanias who said on the left and on the right, and you don't know who's left and who's right he's talking about. Remember that little problem? That guy? But so that notwithstanding, that's annoying, but he went all over the place in Greece in the 2nd century CE. And just the way you might on a summer trip, he went to all the high spots of the old days. That he was not interested in anything new. He was interested in everything old. That's why you go to Greece. And he wrote it all down, perhaps unlike you on your summer trip. and he wrote a book. So he tells us that toward the south wall of the Acropolis, Attalus set up the legendary War of the Giants, as well as the battle against the Amazons, the deed of the Athenians at Marathon, and the destruction of the Gauls in Mysia. Each figure is about 2 cubits in scale. Toward the south wall, so that would be right along there. Now you remember what is below the south wall of the Acropolis and the Parthenon, yes? Conveniently here off the screen so that you have to dredge it up in your memory. I did that on purpose. What's here? Theater of Dionysus. Right. Okay. Yeah, this is the Odeon of Herodes Atticus, 2nd century AD. You're not seeing that. That's not there yet. Just ignore that thing. That's just a blank spot still. Okay. So for those of you that have been reading Mr. Pollitt, you know how we get to these figures. And for those of you who haven't been that studious, I'll just bring you quickly up to date. So here's the thing with this Greek sculpture stuff. Later on, Roman patrons wanted copies, wanted their own version of fill in the blank. You know, the Doryphoros or the Dying Gaul from Pergamon. Whatever struck their fancy and would look nice in their garden or in their villa. And so there were lots of copies made of Greek originals. And that is interesting in and of itself, and were we to be having a class in Roman art, we could talk all about the age of copying, which is sort of like, what do you call it in music? Where you copy something that somebody else, sampling? What? Yeah, that's it. Thank you. My kids would just be like, oh, Mom. You are just such a dweeb. Okay, yeah, covering. All right, so the Romans did a lot of that, but then it's lucky for us that they did that because we have lost almost all of the originals. But plenty of copies ended up in eventually in museums in Europe in various places, but mostly in Europe. I mean, things were found or pillaged over the years from sites in Italy and Sicily and North Africa and Asia Minor and Greece where the Romans were. They were everywhere. And these copies made their way back into museums. And for very popular sculptures like the Doryphoros, you get lots and lots of copies. So anyway, the fact that Pausanias tells us that each figure is about 2 cubits in scale, which is about 2/3 life size, has allowed modern art historians to identify various figures of giants, Amazons, the deed of the Athenians at Marathon. What does that refer to, and who would the enemy be? The deed of the Persians, right? And Gauls. So giants, Amazons, Persians, and Gauls of similar sort of style that are about 2/3 life size. And here are some of the sculptures that have been identified as part of this dedication, which is called, the name of the dedication by Attalus I on the south side of the Acropolis is the Lesser Attalid dedication, because there is a greater Attalid dedication somewhere. So it's called the Lesser Attalid dedication. So now you guys have all just compared the Parthenon with the Great Altar, and you have noted correctly that the people who built and designed the Great Altar in part sampled, covered some of the types of figures, specific compositions and specific figures from the Parthenon. Here, what Attalus does in making this dedication is even better. This is even better because it's on the Acropolis itself. It's right next to the Parthenon. How good is this? So you can just imagine the mentality of this time where you've made this great dedication, and you think, this is so much better. We're gonna go in now and improve the deal on the Acropolis itself. So the Acropolis is lacking, the Parthenon specifically is lacking what? What are all the things that you thought were better about the Great Altar that you would now like to see brought out on the Acropolis? All right, so we've got the legendary war of the giants, the Amazons, the Persians, and the Gauls. So what are the aspects that we want to see now on the Acropolis?
As
So stuff that's down at your level, not way up high.
Humanization, just so you relate more to it. Size and what's depicted.
And how will you humanize what's depicted?
Well, the fact that in all those battles, well, at least the Athenians and Gauls, it's all real battles. Those two are real battles. There are people fighting.
And so the subjects will be real as opposed to mythical. Yes, that's how you'll humanize them. Real as opposed to mythical. What else? They won't be monumental now. They won't be that. We only know that because of Pausanias. All right, they won't be larger than life. In fact, they're going to be a little bit smaller than life because there's a lot of them to fit on this space. That's probably why. So down at your level, human, real, not mythical. How else are you going to improve this? Displayed in a way that you can interact with it. What else? So recall the dedication in the sanctuary of Athena at Pergamon. What was so what among the things that were striking about that? What was so striking about that? The emotion. What else? Glorified the enemy. And the advantage of that is? Yeah. Yeah. What by now is the problem, the big disadvantage of these mythical encounters? What did we decide about that? Victory is inevitable, so there's nothing at stake. So in this point of view, the Parthenon is not just old, it's boring and tired, unimaginative. The outcome is inevitable. Who are those? What are those things that have horse bodies and human head bodies and head torsos? Who ever saw anything like that? Here's one of the figures from the Lesser Attalid dedication. He's recognizably not on the good side, meaning the Greeks, or in the case of a Gigantomachy, the Olympian gods, because he's all shaggy and bearded. He has way too much hair. You know, if you're sculpting people without clothes, you have to do a little extra work to make them look different than you. I mean, they are people after all. It's a human body. So if part of the point is to make this figure recognizable as the enemy, then there has to be a way to make that person look not like you. And in the case of Greek culture, this is done by having a lot of facial and head hair. So you have this torso. Now, he may be 2/3 life size, but he looks like he would have been ferocious. Huge muscles, just I mean, this sort of, you know how those pictures of bodybuilders look where everything is all, yeah, that's it, bulging. But he has been vanquished. An Amazon, similar. Amazons being female aren't depicted necessarily like a male enemy. So their skin is smoother, they're not as muscled up. But they're capable and strong and fierce, but ultimately, as here, vanquished. These would have been, for you to interact with these, you walk around the south side of the Parthenon, they would have been at your feet. You would have been picking your way around dead bodies, sculpted dead bodies. They weren't elevated up high. The giants are representative of a battle at the dawn of Greek time. The victory of the Olympian deities over the giants is a victory for the Greek way of life, civilized, ordered way of Greek life over the anything goes barbarism of the giants. The victory of the Greeks, specifically the Athenians, over the Amazons is a victory from the time when heroes walked the earth. That's the Greek heroic age. That's the age of the Iliad and the Odyssey. The hero who leads the Athenians against the Amazons was Theseus. Remember him on the Athenian treasury at Delphi? So Athens being the bulwark of Greek civilization and culture, the victory of the Athenians over the Amazons establishes on a mortal plane what the victory of the gods over the giants establishes on a cosmic plane. The ascendancy of Greek civilization and culture. The victory of the Athenians over the Persians at Marathon, you see here a Persian who is about to expire. Now we are able to show a Persian, identify a Persian by his clothes. He has those Persian pantaloons on and a cape and the kind of cap that identifies him for us. Persians in battle were attired like this, although they would have also had weapons. The victory of the Athenians over the Persians brings the story down closer to mortal time. So there's the cosmic age with the victory of the gods over the giants. There is the heroic age, the victory of the Athenians over the Amazons. There is recent history, a couple hundred years ago, with the victory of the Persians over the Athenians over the Persians. The idea that some of this is legendary and some of this is real does not exist, you will note. These are just different stages in that long-going, constant struggle to keep the forces of barbarism at bay. Here's another of the Persians from the Lesser Attalid dedication. Just like in the dedicatory scheme in the sanctuary of Athena at Pergamon itself, there are different stages of consciousness and fighting. So here, this fellow is still, he's wounded, he's down, but he's still defiant. So we have dead, we have dying, we have still defiant. These are melodramatic expressions. Again, think that you are walking around a battlefield, or several battlefields, several different battles. And then the next logical step, the gods versus the giants, the Athenians versus the Amazons, the Athenians versus the Persians, and the Pergamines versus the Gauls. Which of the stories on the Parthenon does this story replace? Because we've got plenty of battles on the Parthenon, right? 92 metopes, all four sides. 4 big battles. What are the battles? Gigantomachy, Centauromachi. What's another one of the battles on the Parthenon? And Trojanomachy. Okay. So which battle does the battle against the Gauls replace? Which battle? Probably the battle, in the Lesser Adela dedication, the battle of the Athenians versus the Persians is in essence the Trojanomachy. It's the West versus the East. It's human. Yeah, you're right in that they are not specifically the same thing, but they're probably basically the same. Yeah, the Centauromachi. This is actually kind of, I was just thinking about, I actually just thought of this morning when I was looking back at these slides before coming in to talk to you and thinking that there are some attitudes and ideas that we pick up completely unconsciously, and they are so powerful. And in fact, the fact that you pick them up unconsciously is what makes them so powerful. They're kind of insidious. And this is one. This unexamined absolute connection of other human beings and other cultures with complete non-human or not worthy of the kind of respect and dignity that we accord to ourselves. So if you in the 2nd century BCE go up to the Acropolis and you walk around the Parthenon, you see the metopes, the gods, the giants, the Amazons, and you see the lapis and the centaurs. And centaurs are obviously not human. Okay, fine. I mean, they have horses' bodies, all right. I wouldn't call that politically incorrect. I mean, they're not human. But I've not seen a rally group for rights of centaurs. But and then you're walking around this sort of battlefield with these bodies. What are you going to think about these people? The Gaul in the Lesser Adela dedication is clearly modeled on the dying Gaul from the sanctuary of Athena at Pergamon itself. Same sort. Think about some of these quotes. There are a lot of very inspiring little quotes on the page that I gave you about, we're all one people kind of thing. How would you relate one of those highfalutin, inspiring little numbers to the Lesser Adela dedication? Because do not forget that you do not have to just make a quote and an object match. That's not actually the point. The point is there are thinkers and artists and writers of this period. They're thinking and making art and they're writing stuff. And sometimes they are at odds with each other. So say you're an artist working on the Lesser Adela dedication and let's just collapse time a little bit. Let's say that you hear about that epitaph that Meleager of Gadara writes. In making a sculpture of a Gaul dying in a Pergamene attack on the Acropolis of Athens, of making this sculpture in which this man looks specific and recognizable and very human, are you affirming or undermining Meleager's point of view? You might want to have a little conversation about that.
The rest of our pieces are in Israel, right? From the weaving stuff.
I don't even know where they are. I don't even know where they are.
Because the very last woman that came and talked to me, she's like, this doesn't prove anything. You need to do use-ware analysis on it. She's like, it's nice that you have these correlates, but this is just suggestive.
What would use-ware analysis tell you? Do you think that they didn't get used?
Well, no, she's like, you need to compare these to the modern tools, and then I was like, that's not going to work because they're wood. Unless like, I would have somebody make replicas.
But I don't even know what that's going to tell. I mean,
you'd have to look for like the wear. And I just say, I was like, well, they're all polished. Like,
but yeah, they were used, so they've got wear. I mean, what else are you going to know? What are you going to know that you don't already know?
Yeah. She just wanted, I don't know, like to make sure that it wasn't used for like master free.
Well, maybe it was sometimes. That's the thing with a tool. I mean, I've used a screwdriver as a hammer. It doesn't mean it's not a screwdriver.
Yeah, exactly. So that was like the only comment. Otherwise, everything was good.
That's good. What do you think?
I would say that confirms the excerpt from the paper, and that by creating such an individual, I guess all these people as individuals, and then walking through and seeing them all on the ground dying, you kind of feel like, gosh, maybe, since you're still interacting with these, that you killed them, you feel kind of bad about that. And then the point of the poem is that they're all inhabitants of the single homeland of the world, so like, why do I have to kill them?
So it makes you part of the entire experience.
Yeah.
That they are at ground level, that they look like you, that you, in order to see them, have to walk around among them, pick your way through them. That the artist in fact is saying, you know, that Meleager, okay, that sounds really lyrical, but it turns out that even our enemies we all share this same small place, this same inhabited world. Yeah? Fine.
Meleager is writing as a Hellenized Syrian. He shares this common culture, and he has the luxury to sit here and say, "Oh, we're all one world, we're all one people." You know, I can sit and he mentions other Hellenized sites. This is Gaul. He doesn't share that culture. We don't know his name. We don't know anything about him other than this is the depiction they chose. It's related to the dying Gaul of Pergamon. It's not so much an individual as a chosen stock representation. They're outside of that common culture, and it's all well and good to say, "Oh, we're all one world," but they're still the other, just like the Amazons, just like the Persians.
So that in point of fact, to make a dedication like this with a focus on the enemy is saying there are still two sides. There's the Greeks, there might be Greeks all over the place. In Gadara, which is in modern-day Jordan, as a matter of fact, and places in Anatolia, and Italy, and North Africa, and still Greece. Okay, there's Greeks all over. We share this common culture. We inhabit a single homeland, the world. But on the edges of that homeland, there are others, and they are our enemy, and they are a problem. So that, in fact, with the artists here, you could also argue, you can argue absolutely both of these, let me tell you. There is no right and there is no wrong about this, which is what makes it interesting. But what you have to do is attend to the facts and make your case when you make your presentation. So you can also say that what the artist is doing here is affirming the structure of the Greek world, which is in part defined by who's in and who's out. And when you think about the long history of conflict, both real, legendary, and mythical, that is almost always the essence of those conflicts. To save the core of Greek civilization, not for land, not for property, not for place, but for culture, for an idea of how to be. How do you know that these people are not that? They don't look like us. We make them look differently. They come in from the outside. They're going to undermine our way of life. So you could imagine that the artist is saying, in effect, to Meleager, oh, that's all very nice. But don't forget, we need a Star Wars missile defense. There's still problems out there. A number of these copies are in one museum in Italy, and they're arranged on the floor in the museum. And this shot, which I happily got off of Wikimedia, I've not been to this museum, gives you some visceral sense of just one little part of what this entire experience must have been like. The figures themselves, smaller than life, but the entire extent of the arrangement, very large. Mr. Pollock explains, to my mind, compellingly, there's discussion about this, about whether there were only victims in these sculptural groups, or whether these sculptural groups also included the victors. So gods, Athenians in 2 cases, and Pergamenes in the final case against the Gauls. There are about a dozen figures of Gauls that have been associated with the Lesser Attalid dedication. And if you times that by, if you think, well, all the gods were represented in the Gigantomachy, that would be a dozen. So then maybe all of the battles were about the same size. So that would be, if you only have enemies, that would be almost 50 figures. 4 battles, a dozen characters. That's a lot. This is a very weird, crowded scene stretched along the south wall of the Acropolis at the top of the Theater of Dionysus. We do some. Do you think this is weird? Yeah? Think this is weird? What's weird about it? So what's weird about it is that you've got all these victims on the ground. Think this is weird?
All the different groups are just kind of mishmashed together.
Right. Well, we don't know what they were. We don't know if there was a Gigantomachy area and an Amazonomic area. I don't think that the battles were intermingled.
Okay.
On the Acropolis. I mean, yes, here you've got an dead Amazon and a dead giant, but it's unlikely that the battles were not discrete somehow or another. Although, we only have the description from Pausanias, we don't really know, but it's a little hard to imagine, like sort of dividing walls or something like that. So there must have been some, all of a sudden you're in another battle zone. But it wouldn't have been exactly like this. So those are a couple of reasons, or at least one reason, because we've got a lot of victims that this would strike you as weird. Other reasons? Or maybe it doesn't strike you as weird. Think this is good? Why?
Well, I feel like it would almost feel like a warning for it not to happen again because they're victims and they are dead people, and you would look at these, you would empathize and feel bad. But because it's the enemy, it kind of
Separates them from you? So
it just doesn't make very much sense.
Oh, it doesn't make very much sense to you because it's victims, but they're human, or it's the enemy, but they're humanized.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's weird because it's just like a bunch of dead enemies. Like, usually the heroes of battle or like army itself, like shown in a dedication, and well, kind of like the
Oh, the Niki of Samothrace?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this is just a bunch of
Yeah, that's a very soaring, inspiring, triumphant victory monument. And this is depressing. Yeah?
I just had a thought. In our modern times, this is equating going to a museum and instead of seeing pictures on the wall, how our artists are now doing installations. And the Athenians were used to looking at the pictures on the wall.
Oh, yeah, this is like, yes,
And now
yes.
This is like
Installation art.
It's an installation where you walk through and walk around a
Yes.
sculpture or a
Yes.
stuff on the floor. And,
Right.
yeah.
To make you part of it. Yeah. Yes.
I think it's weird that you don't get a sense of the battle. Like, I think in previous situations, like in the Gauls, like there was the Gaul and his wife, and like there's different stages of like the loss.
Mm-hmm.
You saw when he was still alive, when he was dying, when he was dead. And these are all examples of dead minus the version. I mean, did we know there was others that were in different stages?
There must have been. These happen to be the ones that I have pictures of. Yeah, there are others.
All right.
Yeah. And so there must have been. I think it's logical to assume that for every single one of the battle groups, the Giants, the Amazons, the Persians, and the Gauls, there were varying state. Except maybe the Giants, maybe that was more conclusive. But yeah, so there would have been different states. We saw that one Persian, the kneeling Persian, the defiant Persian. Right. There was another hand. I wondered if any of you would think it was weird because, it's just these practically life-size human figures. So you're all focusing on the subject, but I just wondered if any of you would think that the style, just this actual style, was weird.
I mean, I think when I say this, I'm looking from a 21st century perspective.
Uh-huh.
But I had taken this class and I was walking through and I saw this. I can't help every time we look at these, I feel like almost arrogant. Like if I was one of the enemies and I was walking through here and I saw these sculptures of people they killed and dead, I'd be looking around. I'm out of here. That's why it seems weird. I know I have other perspectives to look at this. Immediate reaction, but they're almost kind of arrogant. We did.
Because you feel like you're implicated by making you be part of it, which is partially Jane's point. That's really interesting.
I think also if you take it into context of the thing in your life, are all
Or for whom war, they might not have been. I mean, nobody in Athens at the time that this was dedicated personally would have been. There weren't any active battles that Athenians were engaged in at this particular time. In the generation this, but that doesn't mean that war wasn't a real possibility. So in that sense, the idea that you could well be implicated, and in fact that might be part of what the artist is trying to get out of you, draw you in specifically, is powerful. I think is absolutely present. And I ask you this in part because, just to get you thinking about this, but it's not really incorrect to say, we can't talk about it this way. We come from this 21st century perspective, and they don't. Because many aspects of this era, or any era, are part and parcel of other eras too. And when there is something of this largeness and this scope that is put out there to make you think and react, to have made the people who live there think and react, you have as much right to engage with it that way and say, how does this, what does this do to me? That's in part what those artists want you to do. You had your hand up.
I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, that is very interesting. So in all of that regard, so think about the aspects of this that seem good and interesting and powerful and communicative to you, and then the aspects that seem disturbing, problematic, or just, weird or offensive or frightening to you. The Hellenistic age, especially when you read some of the quotes on the page that I handed out, is a period of both international travel and knowledge. People got around, everybody knew about lots of other cultures, but also a period of some political instability. Superpowers colliding, nascent states rising, Rome, for example, against the huge Seleucid Empire. It doesn't take much imagination to transpose any of those words to our own day. And in that regard, what the Lesser Adela dedication makes me think about that's weird is exactly that aspect of sort of installation art, from a sculptural point of view, almost performance art. And the monument that I think of today is this one. Anybody been here? Yep. This is the first war memorial in our nation's capital of this sort. The Korean War Memorial was made kind of as an antithesis to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. The wall, which just has names. The wall just has names. Every individual is accounted for, but their humanity is not represented. Their identity is represented, their individual identity. And at the time when that monument was made, that was the crucial thing. And it's an extremely powerful memorial, and there's lots of conversations we could have about that. But when the Korean War Memorial was designed, it was designed in opposition to that. And that's the way all things happen, So the Lesser Adela dedication, the Great Altar at Pergamon, these guys knew about the Parthenon, they knew about the Temple of the Phaead Agona, they knew about the Temple of Zeus at Olympia. Those were the big standing things. And the new monuments were designed to correct what the people of that time thought were the deficiencies of those representations. Just like the Korean War Memorial was designed to correct the deficiencies, to some extent, of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. And instead of every individual being accounted for who fell in the Korean War, that was eschewed for something more visceral, an attempt to make you feel like you could have been there too. That's just what the Lesser Adelaide dedication is doing, to make you feel like you could have been there too. It works better in the winter. It's in the summer, it's just strange. Don't you think? I mean, this is great because it was it's cold in Korea. I don't know if you, a lot of the time, and the guys are shown with these cloaks because the weather was bad, and it seems so powerful and immediate in the wintertime, and in the summer it just is like strange, because you can there. It's one small troop on patrol, and all the individual members of the troop are present. The radio guy, and there are guys with various sorts of supplies, and they're all looking around like keeping their eye out. But in the goal, certainly, of the designers of this was similar to the goal of the designers of the Lesser Adelaide dedication, and that was to make you feel that you could be engaged with this individually, and that works. This is a not uncommon scene at this memorial, and it is, for service people, a very popular memorial.
Right now in New York City, there's an art exhibit, you maybe heard of it, where you have these several different pairs of naked bodies that are standing facing each other.
At MoMA.
And you need to walk
through them without touching. Right. There have been people who've been thrown out because they interact with the art, who are actually
to engage you.
Yes.
To get you to be interacting, but
with your eyes.
Right. Visually interact.
Yes. Saying, it's not art, it's not life. It's both, it's all, it's nothing, it's not a choice. Yeah. Of course, the big difference, and it's sometimes when you compare installations that are very similar and motivated by similar events. I mean, the Lesser Adelaide dedication is a war memorial, Korean War memorial. And when you compare things that are motivated by the same impulse, both established, the context is the same, both established in large public places, for you to interact with. Then when you want to reflect on what's the difference between my time and that time, it's the differences that are interesting. So here, obviously, this monument shows us. It doesn't show them. And it shows, it doesn't show some kind of, it's not a victory statement like the Iwo Jima Memorial, the three guys with the flag on the rock, which is just across the river from this, actually. This is about the effort that went into it. And there was an attempt here, obviously, to evoke the humanity, the individuality of these guys. You might not think it's quite as successful as ancient Greek sculpture, but that was clearly part of it. And you get these surreal. You have to think about the Lesser Adelaide dedication on the Acropolis in this sort of way. These surreal juxtapositions of a bunch of people milling around, not really paying any attention to the attempt to recreate some reality that you are supposed to partially absorb. But it can be up to you. And that ability to ignore here is made easier by the fact that this is us and these guys are upright and there's nobody in extremis, there's no There are no pathetic, writhing, dying figures. And that over-emotional representation of pathos, of suffering, that the Lesser Adelit dedication conveys, that might just be to make sure that you pay attention. So the Adelids, obviously, they loved Athens, and the great-nephew of Attalus I, Attalus II, who comes to the Adelid throne in 159 BCE, spent his youth studying in Athens. You know, it was like being sent to Boston, or, you know, it was the cradle of university education. All the philosophers were here. And there were these philosophical schools. And Attalus II, as a youth, was raised in the city of Athens, and, you know, could have walked up to the Acropolis and seen his great uncle's wacky dedication along the south side of the Acropolis whenever he wanted, I suppose. And in honor of his years in Athens, Attalus II did not fight any great big battles. He rules Pergamon from 159 to 138, and everything's pretty peaceful during the time that he rules. But like his predecessors, he wanted to make a statement about the connection of Pergamon to Athens, and he wanted to make a large dedication because that's one of the things that kings do, is make large dedications. And the sanctuaries were already all built up. So down in the Agora, things hadn't really gotten fixed up down here at all for a long, long time. And the Agora is really the heart of the city. This is where everybody hangs out and gathers. I mean, you look up at the Acropolis, but you hang out in the Agora. So the Agora, the last time we checked, was pretty boring. It's basically a great big open space, like what you were just looking at. There are a bunch of buildings along the west side, a law court down here at the south, little fountain house. The Panathenaic Way cuts across. And by the year 200, not much had changed. 300 years. But you know how it is with the center of an old city. And it's, of course, that kind of infrastructure, very boring to pay any attention to. I mean, if you're going to make something, if you want to do something splashy, you're not going to do something down here. So not much had changed for many hundreds of years. It was just a slightly irregular, gigantic open space with a bunch of buildings along the west. Now a set of shops in a stoa along the south, and either this might have been a market building and it might have been a law court. We don't actually know for sure which. Over here. So in the first half of the 2nd century BCE, a couple of kings fixed up the Agora. First of all, the whole south side got fixed up, probably by one of the kings of either Bithynia or Pontus. Made a big dedication here with a huge stoa that went along the south side, and that regularized, made a kind of right angle for two sides of the Agora. But then Attalus II made this monumental dedication, which is known as the Stoa of Attalus, because Attalus II dedicates it. And here it is, the Stoa of Attalus in the Athenian Agora. The Stoa of Attalus is the place that gives its name to the Stoic school of philosophy. The founder of the Stoic school of philosophy is Zeno of Citium, whose philosophical ethos is on your sheet on the backside upper left-hand corner. A quote from Zeno of Citium. Kidium is a city on the island of Cyprus, which is on the other side of the Eastern Mediterranean from Athens. But Zeno founded a philosophical school in Athens, and he hung out and did his discoursing and teaching in the Stoas, like the Stoa of Attalus. In fact, the Stoa of Attalus is one of the places he hung out. And as a consequence, his school of philosophy was called the Stoics, because they hung out in Stoas. That's where the name comes from. The Stoa of Attalus is 377 feet long, so it's very, very long. 377 feet long by 65 feet wide. And it's super cool inside. It is today the home of the museum for the Agora of Athens. And so the stuff that you see set up in here are part of the displays in some of the rooms, which were originally shops. So there was this long covered walkway like a strip mall and shops. And actually it's 2 stories, so it's 2 levels, and there were 2 levels of shops and 2 long covered walkways facing out onto the Pan-Athenaic Way. But this is how the Stoa of Attalus looked when it was excavated originally in the 1950s. The people who, the archaeologists who have been working in the Agora of Athens for over 100 years now, almost 100 years, is the American School of Classical Studies, and it's a consortium of universities and colleges in North America. And they have this long-running archaeological project in the Agora, and I have to say that I think Zeno would love this. Zeno will love this little story that I'm going to tell you. So the American School of Classical Studies excavated this clearly very, very long building, and as it looks to you here, it doesn't really look like much, but one corner of it stood to the height of the roof. This is the roof height, because these spaces right in here are where the beams of the roof would have fit across. And enough of the pieces of the stoa, pieces of each part of the stoa, were recovered by the archaeologists that the entirety of the stoa could be reconstructed. And John D. Rockefeller paid for the reconstruction so that there would be in Athens in the 20th century one building exactly the way it would have looked in Athens in the 2nd century BCE. Don't you think Zeno would have loved that? He's so happy. So there were workmen who were hired, and they had fragments of every part of the building original, and then they recreated all the rest from those fragments. So here they are working on the columns. The columns, oh wait, I'll go back for a second. The columns of the exterior were plain, unfluted until about this level, and then fluted because it was a little shopping center. It was a little shopping zone, and when you would have walked in, you might have had a lot of containers and cartons and boxes and bags of things. And I don't know if you've gotten close to a flute on a fluted column, but it's got a sharp little edge. You know, flutes, like if you go look at Northrop, I think columns are fluted on Northrop. And that's easy to nick. You know, it's easy to nick the edges of the flutes. And so this is very practical. So the lower part of the column shaft was unfluted so that you couldn't, because it would have just started to look tacky right away, you know, nicks and flutes. That would not have been good. So that part is smooth, and then the flutes start up a little higher, and here these guys are putting the flutes on the columns. And there were ceramic roof tiles, and here's a worker laying, just as somebody would have done for Attalus II in the middle of the 2nd century BCE, laying the roof tiles. The only thing that was not perfectly done is that the roof tiles end in drain spouts that are covered with decorative decorative tiles that are shaped like have a lion's head, molded face, and the mouth is open and the water comes out of the lion's mouth, and the lion has a tongue that sort of sticks out, and the water arcs out and then comes like this. So, if it's raining and you go into the stoa, because the stoa is really handy if the weather's bad, go into the stoa, you want to, get in between the rain coming off of the spouts. But so the lion's head water spouts in the Stoa of Atlas, the ones that were preserved from antiquity, none of the tongues were intact. And so when the new lion's head water spouts were created, the tongues were not made wholly long. And so the water dribbles. So if you're here on a rainy day, you get a little pelted just when you get inside, from that. But other than that, there it is. It's completely anchors and regularizes and jazzes up the old, sketchy, slightly disorganized agora, and was for Athenians of the 2nd and 1st centuries BCE a place to learn and discourse and shop, and is a place for people today to learn, discourse, and shop too, because the Agora gift shop is there today. Okay, that's very cute. Well, now we need to move to Delos, and we have like 3 minutes. And I just don't think it makes any sense to start talking about Delos for 3 minutes and then stop. So I'm just going to stop. And we'll start on Thursday.